Hi, I'm Quentin Schultze, author of the book An Essential Guide to Public Speaking. An Essential Guide to Public Speaking. And serving your audience with faith, skill, and virtue. Serving your audience with faith, skill, and virtue. I hit you with that subtitle a couple of times because it says serving your audience. And while that's great, and it's at the heart of servant speaking, which is what I'm talking about in this video series and in the book, I want to take a slightly different angle on that now. And this is a tough one for me to address in a short video. I'm fearful. Can I really do this? I'm not just talking about serving the audience here, but I'm talking about serving other neighbors. The gist of servant speaking is to love our audience as our neighbor. But I'm also saying here that we have other neighbors who are not in our audience. And we should serve those neighbors as well. We should advocate for them. Advocate for others. Chapter 18, advocating for all neighbors, not just the neighbors that are in our audience. I believe this is a human calling that we all inherit just by virtue of our createdness, as who we are as human beings, to advocate for others. To advocate, it means to speak up for. Advocate, you think vocal, advocate. To speak up for others. It's a calling, I think, that we just have as human beings. We can't get out from under it unless we're irresponsible. To be responsible human beings, I think, with this gift of speech means to advocate now and again for others. I do believe this. And so I'd like to talk with you about that now for a few minutes. And hope that you'll pick up a copy of the book too to read the chapter. This chapter is not written by me, though I edited it. This was written by Amy King, a wonderful communication professor. And I recruited her to write it because of some of her own life experiences with this. And you'll find out about that when you read the chapter. To advocate for all neighbors, to speak up for them. To speak up for them. Now, I want to mention here a couple of things that have to do with situations where we can identify pretty quickly that we should speak up. One of them is when people are being demeaned. Demeaned. So we speak up on behalf of people who are being demeaned. They're being criticized, they're being put down, they're being made fun of, they're being ridiculed perhaps. This happens all the time. And it happens to us too. And when it happens to us, we would like someone else to speak up on our behalf. Because that is not just who we are. We may have problems. We are not perfect. But when people are wholly put down, when they are demeaned, when they are treated through somebody else's words to be less than fully human, it is not right. And we should be among those who speaks up to correct the situation. I think about this in my own life, by the way, when I'm involved in situations where people start gossiping about others. It's not a public speaking situation, but I start hearing that gossip, these negative things, demeaning things that are being said about other people, and I want to speak up. Sometimes I do, and I have the courage right there in those little settings, but often I don't. This speaking up for those being demeaned, it takes courage in the organizations that we're part of. I'm a Christian, and even in churches I find that people can be demeaned in those churches. Even the leadership can be spoken of in ways that are just not right. So we speak up for those being demeaned, and we speak up for those who are being excluded. Excluded. We all have communication ability, and that can include us in dialogue and discussion about things that will affect our futures. In a way, this gift of communication allows us to participate in helping with other people to determine our futures, to shape our futures. What happens is that some people are excluded. They don't have a voice. You can take any institution, and what you find is that some people are excluded in those institutions. And believe me, I'm not talking here in some narrow political way. I'm not talking about political correctness or anything like that. I'm talking about the reality of what it is for human beings living in a world that's imperfect. And people take advantage of other people by excluding them. I have, over the course of my career as an educator, thought a lot about this in terms of students, for instance. What do students have a voice in a university? What should they have a voice in? What are they excluded from? To me, that's an important question. And I have been in situations where I've had to speak up on behalf of the students and how the institution is moving in a direction that may or may not be good for the students, because the students didn't have a voice in those conversations. So we can speak up for those who are being demeaned. We can speak up for those who are being excluded. Now, there are 3 biblical categories that are quite interesting on this. Going way back to the ancient Hebrews, where they thought about who are the people in society that are most likely to be demeaned and excluded. And they came up with 3 categories over and over again. Those who are poor, those who are young and often thought of in terms of children, and those who are oppressed, held down, kept from freedom, controlled by other people, manipulated by other people, taken advantage of, in short. Those 3 categories are very interesting. So as public speakers, we can always be on the lookout for topics and audiences where we might be able to speak up for people represented by one of those 3 categories. And it's always out there, because it's not a perfect world by any means. Finally, I'd like to say something about democratic discourse, about speaking up, about our responsibility as human beings living in democracies, whether Republican, constitutional democracies, whatever kind of democracy where people have freedom. We should not take that freedom for granted, but we should participate in the institutions of society, in the conversations about society and about the future of society. Democratic discourse. We participate in the discourse about shared interests, our shared future together as a people, whether it's in the local community, in a city, in a state, in a nation. We participate. It's a kind of calling within democracy. And I think when we do not participate, that is to say, we do not speak up to help maintain democracy and keep democracy going, we actually hurt democracy. We suppress it, and we don't want that. So I think we all have an obligation as servant speakers to participate in democratic discourse. So, Chapter 18, it's a tough one to try to summarize, and I hope I've done it some justice. We are called, I believe, as human beings to advocate for all neighbors, not just the neighbors in our audience. We are called to speak up, for those who are being demeaned, for those who are being excluded, and 3 categories to keep in mind that have a long history in the West and biblical tradition are the poor, children, and the oppressed. And those of us who have the gift in democratic society of the freedom to speak up need to take advantage of that and to speak up and to do it as servant speakers on behalf of not just ourselves, but others as well. Please consider this. I think it's vital for our future as individuals and as people together. Thank you.